Hi there, and welcome to another episode here on the Strong by Design podcast show. Your host today, Coach Chris Wilson, and delighted to have our guest who will also be hosting future podcast episodes here on Strong by Design, someone that's been on the show previously and part of Critical Bench for several months now, actually better part of half a year now. And that's the one and only Jo Miller, who's joined by her very amazing Superman-esque husband, Mr. Matt Miller. It's so great to have you both together because telling this story and talking about this topic, I know Jo felt very much like, I don't know that I want to tackle this all on my own. I think it'll be a better conversation to have my partner involved in this conversation to kind of be able to get at some of this stuff a little bit better. And I think, frankly, Jo is just too humble and doesn't like talking about how awesome she is. So her husband will gladly take that over, that responsibility. Before we introduce our very special guests, a husband and a wife, the Miller family, I do want to take a brief moment, as I do in all podcasts, just to say thank you so much to our listeners. It's why we do the show. We do these shows. We have these conversations. We bring on these amazing guests because we are trying to enrich other people's lives. This podcast is a ministry for us at Critical Bench. It's currently not monetized. We've been doing this show for 4 years now, and we're not doing it to make money. We're doing it to help people. And it's a big part of what we do in general here at Critical Bench. We help people in their health walk, in their fitness journey, and we encourage people and we give them tools and different things that they can apply quickly into their life to start to see change and to, move in a better direction. It's also what we're doing here on the podcast, only we can explore lots of different topics, right? We can go and talk about the body. We can talk about the mind. We can talk about faith and your spirit and all of these other things. So that's what's so wonderful about the podcast is it gives us this freedom to kind of go in any direction we want to. And we have done that in the 4+ years that we've had the show. And we will continue to do so. And so delighted to have all of our amazing listeners from all over the world. People from, it's just amazing. We get people from Europe, people from the Far East, people from South America, people from North America. It's really unbelievable. It is a global show, and we're just so delighted that we can impact people all around the world. So thank you so much. So our guests today, Matt and Jo Miller. And Jo, please share a little bit about who you are for any of our listeners who are new, who haven't heard some of your previous episodes where you've been a guest, who you, and of course, I want Matt to, pipe up too.
Yes, well, first of all, I want to say thanks for having both of us. We're super excited to be on the show today. And if you don't mind me saying, since it's May 4th, may the 4th be with you. Star Wars reference. Oh, okay.
No, that's okay. I can handle it. I have a Star Wars shelf over there.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, this won't get deleted from the conversation, will it?
No, I keep everything. Usually the stuff that you think should be deleted is the stuff that makes the show better.
That's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, may the 4th be with you as well.
Thank you. A little bit about us. I've mentioned this in previous episodes that I'm Jo Miller, or as some people say, Killer Miller or Jo Animal. And I've been working as a personal trainer for more than 15 years, a nutritionist, sports performance coach. I also am an advisor for Believe Big. I've coached high school softball for many years. I love all things sports, health and fitness. I eat, sleep, and breathe it. And my better half, Matt Miller, my husband here, I'll have him share a little bit about himself. I will say that I call him Superman because as you learn more about him, he has all the Superman-like qualities, and he's just been so good to me, spoils me, and I don't know what I would do without him.
Oh, Well, I'm very blessed to have Joe in my life, that's for sure. And before saying anything about me, I have to also add on to her little resume. She's also a multi-sport athlete, played softball in college, played a number of sports in high school, and then when she got into powerlifting and strongman, which we'll talk about later today, she always says, oh yeah, I compete and I do this and that, and I have to jump in and say, no, she is a champion strongman competitor. She's a champion powerlifter. So she actually jumped in, got into that, loves it, and has won repeatedly at those sports. So gotta plug that as well.
Yeah, and you've been a big part of this as really a coach for her. Have you not, Matt?
It's really been a great journey. I definitely have been able to help Coach Joe through some of these things, and by coach, I really mean that we both learned together through a lot of our experiences. Now, Joe grew up doing a lot of sports. I grew up being very bad at a lot of sports. And it wasn't until I really, just before she and I met, I started getting into martial arts. I do have a USAW certification for Olympic weightlifting and did 20 years of martial arts, different styles, black belt in Taekwondo, Kung Fu, various different things. So a lot of martial arts, and so I did Olympic lifting for that purpose. But when Joe and I met, that's when all the athletics really hit for me, even more so. And then we grew up together learning things, and yes, I've been able to coach her and help her along.
It's so great too, because it's such a bonding thing, right? The two of you have each other, right? And you obviously are madly in love with each other, because I can see it from the moment I click on this. You guys look like you're truly like, it's like Siamese twins, you know, you're just like connected, you know. And all
are we making you sick?
What's that?
Are we making you feel sick?
No, not at all. Yeah, I'm over here I'm like throwing up in a bucket. I'm so disgusted by your love for each other. No, but it's, you know what? It's great to see, because I think a lot of people don't see enough of that between married couples. People that are really had an adoration for each other. You know, it's one thing, to love your better half, your spouse. It's another thing to really adore them. And I think it seems so genuine, and it's fantastic. So never lose that, for sure. So, people want to know. People are listening right now. We're here to talk about Joe and about her amazing journey in this world, right, of powerlifting and strongman. And I think before we get there, we have to kind of know, there might be people that say, well, what the heck is it? I've always wondered, like, what's powerlifting really, or what is strongman? What got you kind of interested in that to begin with, Joe? After being an athlete obviously your whole life, you were probably exposed to some weightlifting, right? But what got you? This is a whole different level of weightlifting.
Well, in terms of what is powerlifting, the definition of powerlifting is that it's a strength sport that consists of 3 attempts at maximal weights of 3 different lifts: the squat, bench, and deadlift. And as far as how I got into powerlifting, I was actually working as a personal trainer in Baltimore at the Maryland Athletic Club. And I saw this man there that competed in powerlifting, and I was super fascinated by it. I was asking him lots of questions, and he would answer me, and it was day after day, week after week. And then finally, he saw me working out one day and said, "You look like you actually have some really good strength. Have you ever considered powerlifting?" And I said, "No, my name's not Elga. I'm not from Bulgaria." I thought maybe I had to be from one of those super strong countries. And I didn't know that they had different weight classes. I didn't know anything about the sport other than they just lifted really heavy weights. And he said, "Meet me here tomorrow. I want to give you something." And he went home and he brought back a Powerlifting USA magazine. And on the cover of it was Susie Hartwig-Gary, who's in the Powerlifting Hall of Fame. And she is one of the strongest women in the world. She still has the world record in the squat. And she lived locally in Maryland, and he said, if you ever get a chance to meet her, I think you would just love this lady. She's super inspiring, and if there's anyone you want to emulate, you should emulate her. I read the article and I was blown away, and I thought, wow, I would love to meet her and get to know her, and I researched her online. I went on Facebook and friended her. She actually confirmed the friend request, and we started talking some there, and my friend Dave, he started teaching me the rules of powerlifting. I didn't have any equipment. I started, I think, testing what my maxes were in June. I had never done that before. I didn't know what I was capable of. And week after week, I was just testing it to see what I could do. And he had me sign up for a powerlifting meet that July. So I had maybe 6 weeks to prepare. And after he taught me the rules, I bought a singlet, and Matt and I, we went up to Pennsylvania in the middle of a cornfield, and this guy, Nico Hulslander, was running the meet. I mean, just the name alone, he sounds like he's Andre the Giant.
He definitely owns like an axe. He probably has some skulls like just hanging around in his room. And by the way, you said the word singlet. People are saying, well, what's a singlet?
The singlet is kind of like the powerlifter's uniform. You have to wear that. You'll see wrestlers wearing that, and that is the uniform that you wear while competing.
Right. And so you enter into this new world, into a competition that you only prepared for less than 2 months. How did it go?
Well, as far as that goes, I went to the competition. I was super excited, but I didn't have a whole lot of expectations because it was my first time. And I competed that day. I did all the lifts, and my friend Dave, he was also competing. So while he would do his lifts in between, he would run over and he would just say, okay, now it's your turn to lift. And he helped me determine what my attempt should be, how much weight I should lift for each of the 3 attempts for the squat, bench, and deadlift. And then he would tell me when I should eat, when I should rest, everything I needed to know. I just can't thank him enough for that. And Matt was my personal slave that day. And
a clueless, absolutely clueless personal slave, by the way. If Dave wasn't there, we don't know what we would have done.
Right.
But Matt was phenomenal. He got me all my food. He prepped enough food that he could have fed an army.
Yeah.
And I had plenty to eat and drink, and I just lifted when I was told, and I followed all the rules that I was taught. And by the end of it, they announced who the winners were based on your weight class, and lo and behold, I won gold in my first competition.
Unbelievable. What was your weight class?
That weight class was the 114-pound weight class or less. So you had to weigh under 114 or less. I weighed in that day like 109 pounds that day, and I had so much fun. But while powerlifting looks like it's an individual sport, it's really not. It takes a village, kind of like raising children. It took a team. My friend Dave to teach me all the rules and guide me on everything and kind of tell me what I should do at every moment of that competition day. And then Matt, being my personal assistant, feeding me, fetching everything under the sun. He probably hit at least 20,000 steps that day. I think he worked harder than I did.
Yeah, right. You were the one getting all the glory and stuff, right? But he was the worker bee, man. But you know what? He signed up for it, and he was glad to do it because he got to see someone who he loves do her very best. And so, I mean, you can't ask for more than that, you know? That's awesome. So, and I know you're super humble, but it's your first competition, so you must remember what your lifts were. Can you tell us what your 3 poundages were for bench, squat, and deadlift? Come on now.
Let's see. You know, I actually don't know if I do remember off the top of my head.
I want to know.
I think weighing in at 109 pounds, I think my deadlift was around 270 pounds, somewhere around there. And my bench press, I want to say, was 150. And this is all with really strict rules too.
Yes.
Because it's one thing to bench press in the gym where you could do a touch and go. But when you bench, they will say start. Well, they'll tell you when to unrack, and then you're holding the bar for maybe a few seconds before they say start, and you can't move until they say start. And then they say start, and you bring it down to your chest. You're not allowed to rest. If it rests, that doesn't count. So you're holding that tension, and then when they say press is when you press. You press, and then you're holding it again, locked out. I feel like it's almost like doing what you could do for 2 to 3 reps. Touch and go is 1 rep in competition.
It's all technique, right? You can be the strongest guy in the room, but if you're not good at following the directions and the requirements of what that lift is, then you're not going to get your at least 2 white lights. So, for anyone listening who's not gone to a powerlifting meet before, Critical Bench used to sponsor a lot of them. We used to go to them and help people. Used to be up on the platform and these, squat, being a spotter, right on the I remember a guy, he was squatting a lot of weight and he wasn't able to get it up. And so I was like squatting him up, I had to catch him. And I mean, it's amazing, but you have to you get 3 judges on these lifts. And you're looking for white lights across the board. Now, 2 of the judges might like your lift, but 1 might not. But that passes, typically, right? If you get 2 whites, it's still a good lift.
Exactly. Majority rules, basically.
Majority rules. But sometimes you get 3 whites. Sometimes you get 1 white, 2 reds, or red across the board. So every rep, matters. But the thing to remember is that all it takes is the 1 rep. You have 3 chances, and as long as 1 of them counts and it's good, that's a successful meet. Yeah. So, it's, again, insight into what a powerlifting meet looks like, because there's a lot of people that are like, I have no idea what this world looks like. And you and Matt are just learning like all of this in like fast forward mode, right? Like 6 weeks you had to train, and then boom, you're there doing all this.
Yeah, we were full in, like, reviewing the manual and trying to figure out what does this even mean, and going back and talking to people and watching videos. And you make a great point. Sometimes these things are really minor, like what you would consider minor details. If you're benching, for example, that's one where it's very easy to kind of mess it up. If your feet move, if your butt moves, if your head moves, there's so many things that need to stay static, or else you fail that lift because you're not lifting it correctly. And you have to do all of that at somebody's command while lifting maximal weight.
In front of a big crowd of people, and it's different than competing in the gym. There's so many aspects to it. It requires so much strategy. It's like a chess match, really. And I found that in competing in powerlifting, some of the most brilliant people I've ever met compete in powerlifting. How I got in there, I don't know. You got to have some goofball in there, but they have some of the most analytical, mathematical, strategical minds I've ever seen.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It is so much strategy, and it's optimization of everything, of your nutrition, right? Of being at your strongest, at your peak on the day of competition. It's getting the right sleep, getting the right hydration. Like, so many things have to come together on that day, and then having the supporting cast, having the husband or the wife and the team. A lot of people travel in teams, right? So it's not just you up there. Your whole team is there, and they're up there with you. Like, they're up there, like, mentally, they're like it's me coaching my son. I'm coaching a game tonight in a tournament, and if we win, we go to the championship game. I've had anxiety. I had dreams last night in my sleep. I've had anxiety all day long. This is 10-year-old baseball, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm sure my son probably hasn't thought about it too much, but I do as dad and as coach. I'm nervous and anxious, and I just can't wait to see the boys perform at their best and get the win, And so, much like a boxer, he's out in the ring and he's toe-to-toe, face-to-face with his competition, but he's got a corner. And those people have invested a lot of time and energy and effort into getting the most out of that person, right? And so much the same with having Matt, like you're not the same lifter if Matt's not part of the day.
Oh, it's a world of a difference. And I've been on both sides where I competed and coached, and they are both extremely exhausting. I almost think that coaching felt harder. There's just so much to it, and you feel so much responsibility, and it's mentally really draining, but it's also incredibly fulfilling. I think coaching is more fulfilling than competing, but I've loved both.
Yes. There's an element to coaching other people and seeing them tap into their potential and perform at their best. There's a gratification there that I think exceeds personal achievement. When you're part of a bigger thing, a team thing, I think that goes to another level of wow factor for people, and a feeling of like just gratitude and fulfillment and purpose, because you influence someone else's ability in a very massive positive way. And it's super, super gratifying. It's hard to even put into words, I think, sometimes. So you have success. You go on to do more powerlifting meets, obviously, and we're going to talk more about that. But at what point did you say, I think I want to pick up an Atlas stone, or I want to carry a refrigerator on my back, or all these things that we see in strongman competition? Like, what got you going in that direction? What, obviously you had success, but that's again a totally different thing.
Well, I kind of thought that was a natural desire for most young ladies to carry refrigerators. Right.
Most women I know are like, I think I'd like to just pick the whole oven up and carry it across the kitchen.
Definitely. Yeah. But in all seriousness, with powerlifting, love that. Had many great competitions and other great stories I'd love to share, and I learned so much more. That created such a great base or foundation, because you need to have so much strength for strongman. Strong is in the name. But in powerlifting, it's a static sport. In strongman, you have to be freakishly strong while also being able to move athletically. You have to be fast, and you have to have much more conditioning. And there's a lot more variety. From one competition to the next, the events vary pretty dramatically. And with strongman competitions, there might be 5 or 6 events, maybe as much as 8. I think when you get to the big world-class competitions, and you get awarded points for your placement in each event, and then those points are added up, and after all the events are added up, whoever has the most points wins. In terms of how I got into it, I had been competing in powerlifting, and then I had a double mastectomy after my twin sister was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. The doctors determined it was due to a genetic mutation, and because of that mutation, it meant that if you have it, you have nearly 100% risk of developing breast cancer in your lifetime, the BRCA2 gene as it's called. And so my twin sister had her double mastectomy. A little while later, I had another sister who tested positive. She had a double mastectomy. And then a month after that, I had my preventative one, so that I didn't have to walk the path that my identical twin sister walked.
Oh my God.
And she saved my life.
Can we pause right there for a second? Because that's a lot to take in. So you have two sisters.
Yes.
And one of them, which we've talked about in a previous episode, if those of you listening who are just getting familiar with Jo and her story, please go back a few episodes to listen for the one with her twin sister that's now in heaven. But what is that period of time like for you as your family? I mean, you're all fighting really the same battle. And this is all in a very close period of time going through this together, the three of you.
Well, with my twin sister, we were definitely devastated with her diagnosis, but by God's grace, we were given just a hope and a peace that only God can provide. And while it was super hard and traumatic, God provided so much, and we saw miracle after miracle, but it was really heavy having so many of us have to have these surgeries. Although I felt like it's not that I have to, I get to. My twin sister didn't get the warning sign, and she got it and had to go through unbelievably brutal treatments. And for me to be able to learn from her, she saved my life and my sister, my other family members, and for generations to come. Now our family knows. Whereas before that, no one knew that this was a mutation that ran in the family. And eventually our daughter, Matt and I, with our daughter coming in June, she'll eventually be able to get tested to see if she's a carrier. And there's things that you can do to prevent it. So very heavy, but I saw my twin sister overcome the surgery like a champ. And then my other sister, Jenna, who also was a champ through her surgery and so brave. And then I went through it, and I had learned so much from both of them. And after competing in powerlifting, a strength sport, and then doing that, I didn't know if I'd ever be able to compete again. And that was hard because it was such a great outlet for me. I loved competing, being a 3-sport high school athlete, playing softball in college, martial arts. I just have the competitive bug. I love it. I can't get enough. And then thinking I wouldn't be able to do that was very hard, but at the same time, I know that life is more precious than a sport. And so I was grateful to be alive and for that opportunity.
And I have to say too, I won't go into a lot of detail about the surgery itself, but that surgery and the reconstruction, if you go that direction, obviously it's pretty invasive, first of all, and then the way they reconstruct is the muscles are in different places. They're pulled and reattached in different places, and there's things underneath, and it really, so you're talking about something like a bench press especially, that was definitely something we kept thinking, is Joe going to be able to do that at all, much less at a competitive level, because the body is physiologically different after that surgery.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be you took the words right out of my mouth, man. I was going to say, physiologically speaking, physically recovering from something like that's super invasive, right? Meaning that it's not, it's not like an in and out thing, like this is major surgery to go in and remove a body part, to remove a woman's breasts, and then to say, hey, do I still have function of my arm, proper motion of my arm to do things mechanically that I would need to do just to live life, but then also to be physically active, because that's, just such a big part of who you are as a human being, right? To be an athletic, sports, kind of driven human being. So what's that recovery look like for you? And then what's that first competition look like for you afterwards?
So in terms of the recovery, I was told don't do push-ups for a minimum of 6 months. And by push-ups, they meant push-ups where maybe they're modified on your knees or off of a bench. That would be at least 6 months down the road. Although my twin sister started doing push-ups 2 to 4 weeks after her surgery. And I had called her and asked her, wait, when did you start? And she said 2 to 4 weeks. And she said, was I supposed to wait longer? And she didn't know.
Peas in a pod, both very driven.
And so because she did that, actually that caused me to go sooner into my recovery. And when I started, I felt like when I would move my arms felt like I had 300-pound weights in each hand. I could barely move my arms. It hurt to reach for stuff. The first time I tried to do a dumbbell floor press, my arms were shaking like someone electrocuted me. And I only had 3 pounds in my hands at first, 3s and then 5s. I couldn't do the full range of motion without it feeling like everything in my body was just gonna rip in half. And the thought of doing a pull-up just seemed impossible, but I kept working on it little by little, plugging away and lifting, not knowing if I'd ever compete again. But by, I guess, less than a year, I had worked all the way back to my old maxes in powerlifting. And I went in for a checkup, and my surgeon, I told her that I was back to lifting, and she said, "That's wonderful." And I said, "Yes, and I even have my first powerlifting meet on the calendar less than a year after the surgery." And she said, "Wait, what? Powerlifting?" And I said, "Yes." You know, when we had the pre-surgery meeting, I said that I wanted to be able to lift, and she said, "I thought you meant weights that are like 5 pounds.
Yeah, she meant little pink purple ones.
Exactly. And she said, "Well, how much weight are we talking about?" And at this point, I was able to worked my bench up to 175, eventually getting my bench close to 200 raw. And she said, what kind of weight? You're talking pounds? And I described how I did the lift, and she said, "I didn't even think that was possible. I didn't know the surgery would hold, or that you would be able to do that, or you'd be able to do 100 plus push-ups without stopping with strict military form, or pull-ups, 30 without stopping." And so I felt really exhilarated to be able to come back. And the story that I had shared in a previous podcast about after my car accident and then getting back in shape, that fueled me for this recovery. I thought, there was a time where I thought it was impossible before. This feels impossible, but with God, all things are possible. I'm just going to do my best and let God do the rest and see where it goes. And it was a really good outlet to do powerlifting during my twin sister's cancer journey. I was struggling at first, thinking, should I be competing? Should I lift? I should focus more on her, and I was. But then I had a friend say, "Why don't you dedicate your training to your twin?" And it really helped me heal and give me another focus other than all the traumatic hospital trips, surgeries, and treatments. And so that's when I competed in my next powerlifting meet, which went amazingly well.
She also won that one.
And
we have got a really nice plaque for that.
Yeah, this is the first one back after you've gone through this whole thing, which I want to know a little bit from Matt, like what that felt like for him, the husband of this competitor, of this woman, right? But so you take home gold, basically. You're the grand champion at your weight again after going through this unbelievable journey. Wow. So how emotional are you, Joe, at this event?
Oh, for me, super emotional. I mean, I was definitely thinking about how I couldn't have done it without Matt's support. He was so loving and encouraging, and we trained together. We tried to train together as much as possible. Sometimes we have different goals, but no matter what the goals are, we just have a blast. And he's always super encouraging, and he has such a brilliant analytical mind. And I jokingly say that I think that he really invented CrossFit. A lot of things that you see in the CrossFit sport and some other lifting competitions, he was doing really early on, before we got married and even after. And I remember saying to him, what you're doing is really outside of the textbook. It's really outside of the norm. I've never seen anything like this or read anything. And then if you look at CrossFit and some of the things that have come out over the last 15 years, you see, oh, wow, that is a thing. And yeah, he was doing that and thinking in those ways well before.
Wow, that's awesome. I love it. So, Matt, what are you remembering from that part when you got that news that your wife's going to undergo a double mastectomy? What are you feeling in that moment?
Fear, lots of fear. This is something, not just one, any surgery, you don't know how it's going to go. There's always the edge cases where something happens. Usually it's okay, but there's a lot of fear there that I'm thinking about just for her being okay. This surgery in particular is very emotional. There's a lot of connections to that. One, having a surgery that her sister just had as she's going through this cancer journey, it's so connected to that struggle. Two, I mean, this is something that's very, if you're having, like you said, you're having your breast removed, and there's a lot of emotional and self, just the way somebody thinks about themselves for women, that's really bound up in that. So how is she going to handle that? Even with a reconstruction, that's different. And then kind of the competition in sports and lifting is such an outlet for Jo, and it's such a part of her nature. Like, it's who she is. She says she eats, sleeps, and breathes this stuff. She does. Like, it is, she dreams about it. This is her life. This is what she really loves. And there's a risk, and we just don't know what's happening. There's a risk that that's going to be taken away as a preventative measure to make sure that everything's not taken away, if you will. So yeah, a lot of fear, a lot of worry, a lot of concern, a lot of keeping my big trap shut to make sure that I'm not saying that to her, because you don't want to double down on those worries or the things that are going on in her head.
That's right. So what are you feeling in that moment when she's performing at this first meet back, and you're seeing her crush it? I mean, what's running through your mind? Are you getting chills? Are you getting goosebumps? Are you like, I can't believe this woman?
I mean, I'm crying thinking about it. I'm just,
I know you are.
I'm tearing up. That's exactly right. Just you also have to remember that event was at the end of a journey back, right? It was a journey that came out with, weeks of pain and pain meds, and watching her barely be able to move around the house because she was in so much pain after that. It's not an easy surgery. And then watching that struggle back and going, wait, why are you doing push-ups right now? They said, rest a little longer. And then just going through that whole struggle, and then watching the turning points as she starts to hit those numbers again and going, oh my gosh, how is she doing this? And then go into this competition. And honestly, by the time we got to the competition, it wasn't a surprise, right? We got there and we knew what numbers she could hit. We knew what she could do. We knew her mindset. We had done this before. We were there ready to go. And so it was just vindication at that point.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's just going, yeah, darn right you're doing that, because you just busted your hump for a year and now you're getting what you deserve,
Exactly.
It's so commendable to Jo's spirit and the fight. It's just great. People love comebacks. I mean, it's like the greatest story, right? In the human experience is the comeback. People love watching it in movies. People love hearing about it and transformations. And it's not, if life was easy, we'd have nothing really to talk about, would we?
Amen to that.
It'd be really boring.
Amen.
But the fact that we go through these challenges, and it shapes us and changes us and molds us into these different, stronger, just grittier human beings, it's pretty awesome. What were you going to say, Matt?
No, I was just going to say that, it's something, that whole period is something that I just kind of tucked away in the back of my head, and that Jo has been a blessing to so many other people, being able to talk about that with them. Yeah. But she went through all of that, and then I later had a few surgeries, and I was able to pull that out and go, okay, try to be like your wife. Try to be like Jo. Come on, you can do it.
Right.
I'm never as strong or determined as she is, but I can hold on to that and try.
I don't think that's true. He's had major shoulder surgery. I know sometime after that competition, he had shoulder surgery where this injury was so bad that his surgeon said, I didn't think that existed. The level of damage to your shoulder, they thought only existed in textbooks, but it was kind of an anecdote or just not real. Nobody has that. But his surgery was very invasive for his shoulder tear and bicep tear, and they had to reattach things. And then he went on to have major ankle surgery. He had he donated his kidney to his sister in 2018.
Right. That's another podcast. Okay, just so you know, Matt. Yeah, we got you dialed in on that one down the line.
I'm on board.
Yeah.
But she definitely. We've had a few different surgeries, but and recoveries, but those recoveries would have looked different had she not done what she did first.
That's right.
And the way she did it.
Right. No doubt about it. So obviously we kind of glazed over this strongman stuff just because, I want to know, like, what's the most memorable strongman competition? I want like a detail, something about one of the events in the strongman. It could be one that you excelled at or just participated in and have an interesting story about it, because I think people are very like, they've seen strongman on TV, right? They've seen Magnus and, who was like a champion from Iceland from several years back in the day or whatever his name was. I think I'm close. And, but, it's very much a big, manly, 300-pound, masculine thing. But here you are, little 110-pound Joe Miller crushing strongman competition. So what's that look like, or what's a real memorable event that you were in?
I would say my most memorable one was my first one. And after that powerlifting competition, coming back and competing, it wasn't too long after that then my twin sister went to heaven, and training became very difficult. I mentioned that in that first podcast, the one about my super twin, and I was approaching about a year from her where she went to heaven, and a friend invited me to a strongman gym. My friend Annette Collins, she invited me, and I went in there and I met Coach Elena Alsrew and Brian Alsrew, who own the gym Never Sate, and they have a YouTube channel. Brian has one. And when I went that day, it was the first time in about a year that I had fun training. And she taught me some of the events, and I remember trying to pick up the Atlas stone, and the first time I picked up the yoke, I think it was the yoke, where I blacked out just picking it up. It was over 300 pounds at the time, but it was sitting on my carotid artery a little bit. And while I tried to carry it, I kind of blacked out for a second. And then I did the same thing on the Conan's wheel, where you've got this long bar that rests in your elbows and you carry it in front of you and you walk around in a circle for distance. And that one was over 300 pounds.
And just listen to that name, Conan's wheel. You know that there's going to be pain involved, right?
Sounds a touch intimidating if you put Conan in front of anything, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, all of that. The stone was super hard to pick up. It's like it was butter. And the stone of steel, they call the stone of sadness. It is so slippery. It's so big and unwieldy, hard to pick up. So just all of those things I learned from Brian and Elena. And that first day when I visited, they both hugged me like I was family. And they had no idea how much that meant to me. I had just come back from a grief share session at my church, and I was praying for healing and recovery, and God answered it through Brian and Elena Alsrew at this strongman gym. And then another member there, Dave Lee, was my other Dave, who taught me a lot about the rules of the events, and he taught me how to properly carry a yoke, to do the farmer's carry. Strongman is super technical. They look like these big burly people. I mean, it does depend on your weight class, but it requires so much technique, athleticism, agility, conditioning. It takes powerlifting to just a whole nother complicated level, and it's a lot of events. And later that summer, I decided to join the Never Sate gym late in August, and then I saw a video that Brian had, and he said, you should really push yourself, get outside your comfort zone. So I signed up for a strongman competition that November. So I had about 3 months, and that was my most memorable competition because it was my first one since my twin went to heaven, and I dedicated my training to her. And Dave Lee would meet me on off days, and he took me under his wing and just spent a lot of time with me, and I'll never be able to thank him enough for doing that, and for Brian and Elena. And they both have YouTube channels, so if anyone wants to look them up, I highly recommend it. You can learn a lot, and they're unbelievably great people. And it was at that first competition that November. It was the Maryland State powerlifting, strongman championships. And this competition was known for being, what was it, one of the hardest?
One of the hardest in the country. Like, we showed up and they were like, so all the weights are going to be heavier than we said. Let's just add. So the stone, instead of, I think it was supposed to be 130, we're like, we'll make it 140. Mind you, this is for the ladies that are about 115 pounds. So you're adding 10% of their body weight almost on top of what's already there. And that was the case for pretty much the rest of the events as well. It was like, we're just going to make it heavier on the day of. So you show up and you're going, oh, I trained for this, now I have to do that. That's strong, man.
Every single event, they told you ahead of time what weight you had to lift. This is a difference from powerlifting. In powerlifting, your 3 attempts in the squat are attempts that you pick, that you know that you can do. You go up and you lift it, and that's how everybody does their lifts. And whoever ends up lifting the most will win. In strongman, everybody in that weight class lifts the exact same weight. So you may be given an event where the deadlift is, let's say if your max was 315 pounds for someone in my weight class, like weighing around 110, then you had to do that for as many reps as possible in 60 seconds. I was like, wait a minute, that's a lot to do, and that's over 6 events, and all the events tax your entire body. It's so all-encompassing.
Yes. It's unbelievable, the physical requirement, or the capacity to do that much work in a given day. And so prepping for that and being able to manage your energy throughout the day, right? The nutrition and hydration required, the coach that's by your side helping you, kind of get through this whole process. Unbelievable. I've attended events before. They're quite exciting to watch because there's so much going on. And there's some really exciting events because it's kind of like watching a race, or where people are doing a farmer's carry or something, right? Or they're picking up a weird object like a big rock or something.
It was a felt stone.
Right. And have to carry it for distance, or down and back, or how many reps can you get in a minute with this? And it's really, I encourage anyone who's never gone to a strongman event. They're all over the country at small and big venues, is to go to one because they're quite exciting, and it really is I feel like you're one of the greatest athletes going, because you're so strong and so powerful, but so quick and so highly conditioned. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to get through all this.
Oh, definitely. And the mental toughness required is out of this world. And I learned a lot of mental toughness from Brian and Elena, and Brian's programming was just phenomenal. There were things that we had to do where you did an exercise where you filled your mouth with water, and for 10 minutes you did an exercise with water in your mouth. It could be kettlebell swings, and you're just going at maybe every minute on the minute of these kettlebell swings, but you keep water in your mouth for 10 minutes. And so you're only breathing through your nose. And he would do that to help with your mental toughness, or we would do handstand holds for max time. And he had these finishers that were so brutal. And I thought that my training before was really hard, and training in martial arts and then powerlifting and all these different things I've done helped, but he took me to a whole nother level. I felt like an unstoppable human, bulletproof. And so I couldn't have done well in that competition without, of course, Matt, and then also Never Sate with Brian, Elena, Dave, and his wife, Emily, and even the other members. They helped so much. And those 6 events that day, you asked which one really stood out to me. They were all so meaningful. It's really hard to say. I know one of the events was the Viking press, where you have this bar on a lever and another bar on the end, and it's kind of like doing a push jerk or push press, where the bar is on a lever, it's hooked to something, and they told you the one weight it was going to be, but they don't tell you how much weight the bar weighs itself. So it was just so much heavier than what you expected. And the competition that I did, many of the people with 0 events, it was so heavy they couldn't even lift it one time. But
it's unbelievable.
With the Viking press, I was able to get
Joe
it.
was the only person who got that one.
Wow. No kidding. So for her weight class, for her, division, so to speak, she was the only one that actually was able to perform the lift.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was extra powerful, especially with upper body. After having a double mastectomy, the double mastectomy makes it harder to lift. You're so much tighter. You almost feel like even without the bar, something's already resisting you a little bit more. So it's like whatever the weight is on the bar, you're actually lifting more than that because of that surgery. And it makes it so much harder. Your range of motion isn't quite the same. So things are really different. So to be able to do that when no one else was able to lift it, it felt like, what was it, the story with the sword in the stone? Where they pulled
Excalibur.
The Excalibur.
Right. That's
or
right.
Thor's hammer,
trying
something
to pick
like
up
that.
Thor's hammer, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I have Thor's hammer right over there. I'm a bit, one of these days, maybe we'll do a podcast episode with me talking about my fascination with superheroes and how my room is filled with them. Yeah, it's so great. I love you being able to dig back into your memories of these events. And I remember personally the first time I ever did a yoke many years ago, probably about 10 years ago, and long before we had our own. I was at Strength Camp. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Elliot Hulse, but Strength Camp down here is just the town over, and we go way back with Elliot. And we were at his facility, and I was attending a seminar, in-person workshop, and we had a little fun out back with everybody attending, and I got up under a yoke, probably had 400 some odd pounds on. I'd never walked with that much weight before, and just to stand under it and get it off the ground and then start walking, I felt so out of my comfort zone. And like, I've never had that much force pushing down on me while trying to walk, and I was so uncomfortable and so hated it. But then, some years ago, we got our own yoke, and I remember, doing it and making it a fun thing. Now it's actually one of my favorite things to do. And I don't go like strongman heavy. We'll put between 300 and 400 pounds on it and, do down and back carries on it. But it's such a great form of activity for total body strengthening and neurologically, that I just have such an appreciation for an exercise like that, that's originated with strongman competition, and such a fun activity, I think, for anyone looking for something besides traditional weightlifting. The strongman stuff and merged with like the CrossFit stuff, there's a lot of fun in there, and you just got to find the stuff that works for you based on your own limitations and injuries and stuff. So what does competition and competing look like these days for the two of you? What's on the horizon? What's maybe something recent that you've done or planning to do?
Oh, definitely. Well, I did want to say with that first competition back with strongman, I was going to say that was my first one after my twin went to heaven, and when I did that after all 6 events, it was a grueling day, the hardest competition I've ever done. When they added all the points up, I didn't know where the points fell. You don't know where you are at the time. And they called my name and I won the competition, and just tears started streaming down my face. And I kind of look up to heaven, like I'm looking towards my twin. That's for her. And she really her love for me and support and example just gave me so much strength. And of course, I couldn't have done it without Matt, who basically killed himself that day.
That was a big one. There was a lot that day.
It was really tough. And the yoke that day was very, very difficult. 360 pounds you had to go as fast as possible, 100 feet.
This is you doing it.
Me.
At 100 and whatever you were, 100 and what, 10 to 15
pounds? At that point, I had gained a little more muscle, so it was around 115, so 360 pounds. And after my car accident, I had mentioned all my back injuries, disc problems. I have scoliosis. Putting a yoke on my back with scoliosis is no joke. It makes it so much harder. And I remember the first time I lifted the yoke, I thought, I literally think my bones will shatter and just become powder on the floor. But I watched Elena Alzru, who is about my same weight or a little bit lighter, and she lifted it up with this big, beautiful smile on her face, no sweat. I mean, she is amazing. And I thought, okay, well, I may not do what she's doing, but at least my bones won't shatter. She looks like her bones are still working. So that really, just her example, seeing such a petite yet fierce and strong woman do that and have so much fun, that helped me go, oh, okay, I'm going to give that a try. And so to do it in competition after max deadlifts, the farmer's walks were grueling, the Viking press, the stone of steel, everything. It was so fatigued, but to do all of that in one day and then to win on my first strongman was just so powerful.
Right. And that being obviously extra emotional, because I feel like the strongman, getting into that was such a therapeutic thing for you, dealing with the loss of your sister, and it really helped fill a void, a massive void. Obviously that'll never be filled fully, but it really helped you recover and heal. And then to get that acknowledgement or that reward of like, wow, that was for her, and here I am standing victorious again after going through that. And so that's so awesome to think about. And one more thing for you guys listening. Okay, 360 pounds, I could do that. Okay, Joe's 115 pounds doing 360, which is more than 3 times her body weight. That's like me, a 200 and change pound man, doing closer to 700 pounds. So just to put that into perspective, the ratio there, 3 times your body weight, with not just that, but like when you were talking about your bench earlier, almost 3 times your body weight. And I'm sure your squat's probably in that ballpark as well, right? So what are your best all-time lifts for squat, bench, deadlift?
Actually, my squat isn't nearly as good. I found that with my back injuries and the scoliosis, that actually has made squatting a lot harder for me. So my squat is like maybe a little over 2 times my body weight. My deadlift, I got close to 3 times my body weight. Much better with the deadlift for some reason. And then the bench press I got close to 200 pounds raw at that weight. And then, that's the thing, like you mentioned, your body weight to what your lifting ratio is different. So maybe someone could lift 400 pounds on the deadlift, but if I'm doing 320 or more, then ratio-wise versus someone that's heavier, the person that is lifting more compared to their body weight would win that.
Yeah, in powerlifting, that's the Wilks score. So there's a whole calculation to evaluate that, and there's some other physics that go into that as well. That's why people say ants are so strong. Well, they're not actually. There's a volume thing there. However, for Joe, when you look at that, they do the Wilks evaluation, and that's why when we look at like the one where she won best lifter, that's because she was the best pound for pound out of everybody, regardless of what your size was. And when you put it through this the calculation, it figures that out.
Yeah.
So
I remember my first, and I want to find out what's on the horizon for you guys. My first exposure to seeing a high-level power lifter was many years ago in the late 90s when I worked for a world gym chain up in Connecticut. And this gentleman, one of these days, I might have to just reach out to him and get him on the show. He was phenomenal. His name is Lloyd Weinstein, and he was on the cover of powerlifting magazines back in the 80s. I remember him competing in a Masters event that was being hosted in South Africa, and he was preparing for this in like 1998, 1999, and he asked me to spot him on some squats. This 155-pound man who was built like a spark plug. I mean, the guy was his body was as hard as my desk. I mean, this guy, but he was so dialed in, like smart, talk about smart and just technical, right? And I remember spotting him for a triple with 465, I think he was doing a triple, 155-pound man. And he did a triple, and I could barely stay with him to go down as far as he was going down under perfect form, and did it 3 reps, way better than I could make 315 look as a man who was 60 plus pounds heavier than him. I remember thinking to myself, if I could come close to looking like that, when I mean, it was like thing of beauty to watch him lift weights. Like he was so dialed in and so masterful. And I just think there's something to it, an appreciation, I think, when you've been around it. And the more I think back, I'm like, gosh, I wish I had showed him more appreciation in the moment, at the time as a young 20-something-year-old idiot. So what are your plans going forward here, Matt and Joe?
Well, as far as moving forward, as I mentioned before, we're around 8 months pregnant now. We're expecting our miracle baby girl in June. So probably for the next year, competing will be on the back burner. We'll be competing at being parents.
Yeah.
We're super excited. But I do hope to get back into some powerlifting, strongman, and possibly CrossFit. In 2020, we did a ton of CrossFit together, Matt and I. And we even got to train with Rich Froning at CrossFit Mayhem.
Oh, wow. Amazing. I remember seeing pictures of you with him. Yeah.
I've never been more tired in my life.
I can imagine.
It was amazing.
I can imagine.
It was absolutely incredible. So lots of fun there, but we're really excited to be able to be good examples of good health, taking care of your body, doing the loving thing in terms of nutrition and exercise.
Yeah, Joe is someone who, obviously, I have not experienced, at least in the past, many women who are as driven or as focused as Joe. Actually, none. Except for Jess.
Oh,
again, two peas in a pod. Her sister they were like that. But that's not something that you really find. And when I remember watching Joe when she was at her previous job before we moved down to North Carolina, the folks they would be training a class of kids, and the girls would say something like, "We're girls. Why are you going to have us do pull-ups?" And they'd be like, Joe, can you knock out some pull-ups for us? And she'd hop over and bust out 20. And be like, is this enough? Or should I keep going? Or like the guys would be like, okay, we really don't think we can climb that rope. Same thing. Joe, can you hop up that rope? Up she goes, boom, drops back down. And they're like, okay, I guess we're doing this. And so to be able to raise a daughter who has such a role model of overcoming adversity, overcoming difficulties, such a good spirit and a good heart, a good Christian woman who's going to show her how you can, like she said, eat right, work out right, and just be super strong. Mm-hmm. I can't wait to see how she turns out.
Right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, the apple doesn't usually fall far from the tree. Let's just say that, especially when you have two parents like yourselves who are going to be all in, right? You're already all in. The baby's not even here yet, so you could tell this baby's going to have no choice but to be loved on by a super supportive mom and dad, and it's going to be fun to watch for sure. And we can't wait, obviously, to get you down here to Florida so that we can meet you both in person. Finally, have for a workout here in the compound, and then bring the baby. So that would be, I think, super fun for sure for everyone. it's really fantastic to have the two of you together. Really appreciate you, making the time today to do this, and to, be able to talk about some personal stuff here. This isn't just topical, superficial stuff. I dug a little deep here, and that's what makes it a much more meaningful conversation. We're not just talking about powerlifting and strongman. It goes much further than that. So really loved getting to know you both better. I just have that much more appreciation for the people that you are and what you're doing in the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. This was a lot of fun, and you managed to make Matt tear up. Although I will say, I jokingly call him Waterworks because he's so sweet and sentimental and really wears his heart on his sleeve. He's tough. He's got his black belt. He is very, very powerful, but also...
I cry easy.
I'm the same way, dude. I cry pretty easy. That's the running joke around here is like, who's gonna cry first?
Nice.
Usually, depending on whatever it is, and the money's usually on me. I was, lastly, I was thinking earlier when you guys were talking about your achievements and accolades and things. I'm like, man. Talk about like if a purse snatcher was just like thinking he was going to get one over on you guys. It's like dealing with two Chuck Norrises or something. I'm like, this could be the worst mistake ever made by like a thief or somebody like to like come up on you guys and think like, ooh, here's a couple I could, it's like, dude, you just cost yourself, a lot of pain. So anyway, just love it. Thank you so much. And listeners, thank you again for joining the Strong by Design podcast show. Hope you really got a lot out of this one. So much great just life lessons. And we've gotten to learn a lot about both Joe and Matt in this conversation. And now it's a good time to hit that 5 stars, leave us a rating, whatever platform you listen to the podcast. And now you go back and listen to past podcasts with Joe or with some of our other amazing overcomer type stories. We have several of them on the channel or on the podcast. And we would just, love for you to go back and listen to those because, there's just so much good value in all of those conversations. And that's why we do this show. So thank you for choosing Strong by Design. And we'll come back to you next Wednesday, as always, with another podcast. This is Coach Chris, and we love you. God bless.